3 years ago, Games Workshop and I had a meeting about what I thought was going to be a dream project. I was going to build a diorama to display at Warhammer World.
This was all going to be tied to a big launch event for the second edition of the Horus Heresy, and myself and a bunch of other creators were going to be flown over to celebrate the new edition.
This is the mecca of Warhammer World.
After that first meeting, I got incredibly excited, and as the first creator brought onto the project, I got my pick of the settings for this epic diorama, and as I was already preparing a monster Horus Heresy campaign to launch alongside the new edition, the choice was easy. A mega vertical diorama depicting the betrayal at Calth with 3 layers of intense diorama action for the battles in orbit, the planet's surface, and the subterranean arcologies.
I thought that if I'm making a display for Warhammer World, this has to be the best thing I've ever made. It's gonna have to hold up next to the greatest Warhammer dioramas in the world.
But over the next 6 months, from that first email and meeting right up until I stepped off the plane in Nottingham, the project's scope unfortunately changed drastically, and my hopes and dreams of a monstrous piece of scenery were whittled down to me painting up a box of models and chucking them in a glass case in the gaming hall.
It was still a joy to finally get to go to Warhammer World and meet a bunch of lovely people on the trip, but ever since, that dream of a vertically integrated massive diorama to show off my 30,000 point collection of Horus Heresy minis has been eating at me. And today, for a reason that I'm about to get into, we are finally going to build a Zorpazorp diorama worthy of Warhammer World.
Now, one advantage of not actually having to ship this to Nottingham is that, in true Zorpazorp fashion, I've decided to make it even bigger. Some of you may remember almost a year ago, I built this shelving unit to form part of the new studio backdrop, which has 5 massive shelves, all 2.4 meters in length, rigged with LEDs.
Unfortunately, over the last couple of months, this supposedly beautiful backdrop has just become a dumping ground of half-finished projects. Dawn of War, random conversions, and a couple of Titans as well. Now, this is a hot mess right now, but it is the perfect skeleton for a Warhammer diorama like nothing I've ever built before.
First job is stripping the shelves right back, sorting all of the scenery sets and armies, finding them new homes in the functional chaos of the Zorpazorp studio. I even ripped down all of the LEDs because this shelf is about to go through some massive structural changes with an even more complex LED lighting system.
I want this entire double bay to be dedicated to one battle. The betrayal at Calth, my absolute favorite conflict from all of the early theaters of the Horus Heresy. And in this one single massive vertical diorama, I want to capture all the major plot points from the Battle of Calth in all 3 theaters of war. The space stations up in the upper orbit, the main landscape of the planet itself, and the subterranean arcologies that become the battleground for the underworld war after the surface of Calth becomes irradiated.
So I'm just going to rebuild this shelving layout to focus on 3 bigger levels and a small kind of storage platform down below. This new configuration is going to give us a heap more scope for detail, particularly in our central layer, which needs space for 2 Titans to be shooting dropships out of the sky.
But before we start planning the diorama, we first need to fully appreciate what we're trying to show off, which means, for the first time since I moved to New Zealand 2 years ago, it's time to finally unpack my most beloved Warhammer armies.
We are of course starting with the mighty Cobalt Warriors of Ultramar, the Sons of Guilliman, the Ultramarines. Now, these aren't no 40k smurfs bereft of character and flavor. These are the real Ultramarines, the Legiones Astartes, who are 100% immersed within their space Roman vibe and ready to build an empire spanning 500 worlds.
A bunch of vehicles and just a horde of infantry. This is somewhere in the vicinity of 10,000 points of Ultramarines, but if we've got our good guys, we need some bad guys. Also, I can't find Guilliman's arms. They'll turn up.
There is no one more satisfying to despise than the 17th Legion word-bearers, except of course Erebus, the worst word-bearer there is. Accompanying a host of word-bearers legionaries, we have some ravening cult hordes and an absolute horde of vehicles ready to roll on over Calth and grind it into the dust. Oh, and of course, each force also has a Titan.
I spent 2 years preparing these armies in the lead up to the last Horus Heresy edition to film the biggest project I have ever made to date, the Mark of Calth Horus Heresy campaign. My goal was to basically break the internet with Warhammer battle reports like nothing anyone had ever seen before, and when the campaign launched, it worked. And then a lot of stuff happened behind the scenes that I still can't really talk about. Within 3 months, my monster campaign, spanning 9 mega battle reports and over 20 hobby videos, was dead in the water. But with a brand new edition of the Horus Heresy just around the corner, I am thrilled to announce that the Zorpazorp Mark of Calth campaign is back. And I mean right now. Over the next 6 weeks, every single week I will have an absolutely mental hobby vlog dropping right here on Zorpazorp, and a battle report each week on my battle report channel, Zorphammer. These are just absolutely lush gaming videos. VFX, sound effects, crazy cinematic sequences, Warhammer action that is going to blow you away. So this diorama is going to be that entire campaign converted into an epic vertical layout focused on the phenomenal finale to the campaign, which is coming out over on Zorphammer in just 3 weeks. And we are going to start with the middle layer, the war-torn surface of Calth.
I grabbed my 2 spare shelves that I just ripped out and slapped them down on the bench, and this is going to be perfect for planning out the diorama, but now it's time to start assembling the buildings. And we're going to need some really tall skyscrapers. I want my 2 Titans to be ducking and weaving between blown out hub blocks, so the buildings have to be huge, so I've armed myself with the ultimate all-in-one personal manufacturing hub. This is the Bamboo Lab H2D, and this absolute monster is so much more than just a 3D printer. It's a dual nozzle FDM printer, a laser cutter, a laser engraver, and a digital cutter, all in one mega package with a monster print bed.
Look, an absolutely flawless first print. I mean, it's no surprise. The H2D is essentially the reliability and the speed of the P1S with a massive print bed, not to mention all the other features. This thing is going to be a workhorse for us.
So first up, I just fired an absolute truckload of prints through the H2D just using a single nozzle with one type of filament. Classic standard 3D printing, and of course, because this is a Bamboo Lab printer, everything was printed lightning fast with utterly flawless print quality. These are all from the Siege of Castrograd range of STLs from War Scenery, which are just an amazing set of sci-fi buildings, perfect for basically any 30k or 40k city. We are going to put them through their paces today. First up, I've got a huge amount of intact and ruined versions of the main hab block, which we are going to combine and kit bash into some epic skyscrapers. First, a small cleanup to remove the outer brim, and then we're going to look at the smaller ruined versions first. These epic little prints come all blown up and ready to deploy straight into the board, and while super useful in these mini ruined configurations, their real value is in kit bashing. I moved on to the massive intact hab blocks. Now, instead of printing them a couple of levels high with their roof, I've printed a bunch of extra upper floors to make them nice and tall, and then got some of those ruined pieces, and we're going to combine those onto the top of the structures to make them look blown apart. This whole range assembles glue-free with these epic little connectors, which makes it super modular, so I assembled my first building 3 levels high and then placed 2 ruins on top and marked up the intact levels with a Sharpie, because it is time for some battle damage. My favorite thing about working with 3D prints is the ultimate freedom. Filament is so cheap and it's so easy to just slam out more buildings. It doesn't feel scary at all to get real creative with my multi-tool and just blast chunks out of these structures, and in just a few minutes I've got this awesome ruined building with a completely unique silhouette. I dived into my second building, this time only 2 levels high before the ruins went down, and repeated the process, going for a slightly different style of ruin profile with a higher blown out wall on one side, like a shell's detonated in the opposite side of the building, which creates some lovely access for gameplay around the internal stairwell. And then for the third building, I got even more creative, taking damage right down into the ground floor, carving up intact flooring sections to expose the lower level beneath, and created a really unique, lopsided ruin profile. With my first 3 buildings looking swell, I dumped them onto the studio workbench and grabbed some filler and got to work kind of covering and patching all of those cuts. When the walls are broken open, it reveals the 3D printed crosshatch infill, and while that grid pattern does look kind of cool, too much of it showing through doesn't look realistic for a solid wall. These are just going to look absolutely awesome, packed out with rubble and gribblies and of course, a heap of minis.
So for me, this is actually a very small board. There is not very much real estate here, and these buildings have already taken up a huge chunk of it, and there are a lot of models that I need to fit in this section of the diorama. So now we need to engage city planner mode, find some kind of awesome layout for these prints, as well as starting to build some verticality and some real detail into the city streets. Tried to do like a big cinematic walk to camera there, and then I just had a thought, I also have to fit the Titans on this part of the board.
Alright, city planner mode activated. Now, one of the most important parts about making a city build look good, and the one everyone kind of forgets, is the foundation. How do our lovely buildings connect to the world beneath? We need streets and plateaus and shape and life at the ground level of the city, not just a bunch of buildings sitting on a flat sheet. Luckily, my mate Louis from War Scenery is a genius, and the Castergrad range also comes with this amazing plateau system, which is a set of super modular raised platforms that are going to elevate our buildings up above the busy thoroughfares of the streets below. If you want to print some of these gorgeous Castergrad prints, by the way, you can use my link down in the description and code ZORP20 and you'll get 20% off the entire War Scenery range. And for every $1 you spend at War Scenery, I get a little kickback to support Zorpazorp. I smashed a bunch of these platforms out on the H2D, whose massive print bed made short work of all the walls and floor tiles, and then before locking down that city layout, I decided I would need some statues to decorate the plateau under the guild hall, and picked a nice statue wielding a sword and a hammer, kind of like merchant warrior vibes, and then grabbed a roll of Bamboo Labs support filament and installed it in the second nozzle of the H2D. Inside Bamboo Studio, I could then assign the interface between the supports and the statue to be printed with the second nozzle. The support material doesn't bond fully to the normal PLA, allowing for super clean support removal, and with the use of the second nozzle for the support material, there isn't this huge increase in wasted filament and longer printing times, which happens when you use a single nozzle and change out the filaments through an AMS. After having a big play with the system to explore how it all works and the insane modularity, I set about mocking up a layout on our spare shelves to see how we could make use of these platforms to build that shape into our city layout, and I have had a very cool idea. The big final battle of the Mark of Kelf campaign features this frankly mental urban siege of the guild hall. In fact, in the battle over on Zorphammer, Ollie and I waged war over this massive structure with nearly 60,000 points of Horus Heresy models. It was epic, so I want our diorama here to capture a slice of that story, so I decided a double height plateau on one side could represent the stairs up to one of the entrances of the guild hall, and then the other structures can be raised up on a single plateau to give us that dynamic city look we're after.
Compositionally, this center layer has to be all about the Titans. This is kind of their big moment. I don't really think it's quite working. This warlord all the way back on this side, he probably needs to come forward, but I do quite like this sort of shape we've got here with that kind of upper guild hall section, the Reaver, and then some buildings. So let's kind of compress this a bit and see what we get.
I did a few tweaks and adjustments, and with the Titan positions a bit more balanced and some changes to the platforms, I think we're absolutely banging. And then I began the process of clipping all these plateaus together, because so far they've just been sitting loosely in place while I mocked it all up. I just used the clips for now, no glue, because I'm going to actually weather these heavily in a little bit, but for now I slid them all into the diorama, ripped out a bunch more of the old LEDs that kept hitting me in the face, and then slapped in the Titans, the buildings, and then dragged over my tables very carefully and decided to give this layout a proper test, with a lot of pew-pew noises, imagining how this diorama is going to look with models.
So here is our little mock-up. First thing you'll notice is there is a lot of troops left over. All of those are going to have to be spread through the arcology level and up in the spaceship orbital layers, but this is kind of working. There's a lot of negative space up in the top though. Now we are going to have some, vehicles like aircraft kind of suspended, maybe some jump troops coming off wires and things, but I still think we need more kind of up and down shape to this city, which means these buildings need to get even bigger.
So I ripped a bunch of the models back out so that I could get access to those buildings, and I could have just stuck those models down on the shelf below, but I mean, Helm's Deep is right there, so what was I supposed to do? I brought in a heap more intact levels of the hab block and first bulked up our 2 central buildings to get some real beefy height above the Titans, and then grabbed my Sharpie and started marking them up for battle damage. My aim here is that all through these buildings there are holes blasted out so we have even more places to dress models that can really easily be seen, and I want to have a bunch of combats across the streets between the upper levels of the buildings to create more stories within the layout higher up the display. Exactly the same process as before, except this time I'm not just weathering down from the top, I'm literally blasting multi-story spanning holes out of the middle of these buildings. This is honestly the most fun I have had in ages. 3D prints for urban cityscapes is game changing. Then my mate Andy came round and we got some dual action happening with Andy filling in the holes that I was blasting out of these first 2 buildings, and before we knew it, they were absolutely ruined, in a good way. I now decided to glue a bunch of these sections together for extra strength, as so many of the new ruined shapes were like hanging on to the rest of the building by some pretty small contact points, and I do not want to risk any of my models getting crushed in a collapse. And then, back in the Dio, we can already see how insanely well that is working. With all the buildings printed, I jumped back to the H2D and switched it from 3D printing mode to laser cutting. This is the high-powered 40-watt laser, and I grabbed some 3mm plywood and jumped into Bamboo Suite and knocked up a layout for some Ultramarine Ultima stencils. The laser sliced out a bunch of different sizes, and as we can see there, straight down onto my workbench, they are going to be fantastic for sprucing up the city streets of Calth with some stencil goodness when it comes to painting. I also couldn't resist trying out the digital cutting mode on the H2D, swapping in the blade tool and slicing myself up a lovely vinyl Zorpazorp logo to decorate the workbench. That is going to look fantastic when I'm shooting painting shots. Switching between these various setups was actually pretty easy. You don't even have to disassemble any of the 3D printer elements. The laser and the cutting modules just bolt straight onto the front. This H2D really is a feat of engineering. I also changed things up even more for our 2 side buildings, printing a heap of new Castergrad buildings, the administration block and the warehouse for some different shapes, and I've decided to hint at the city beyond and make this feel bigger than just our little slice by using halves of each structure and pushing them hard up against the diorama wall. Except, it won't be a wall, it will be a portal to the rest of this massive city, stretching far off into the distance with a bunch of buildings and titans that look very similar, but facing the opposite direction. Yeah, mirrors, people. I'm going to line the side panels of the diorama with mirrors, and by putting structures hard up against the glass, I'm hoping we can get this look that the city is way bigger than it actually is. Although, of course, the mirrors are going to need to be cut to size.
Never cut glass before, never worked with glass before, never even seen glass before. What is glass? Glass cutter with a tungsten carbide tip. I've got some WD-40 to lubricate the glass. I've never done this before. I have no idea what I'm doing. I just watched a tutorial by Derek Hunt, this glass artist, about 15 times on repeat, and I'm ready to give it a crack. Not a crack, a cut. Not a crack. No shattering. Oh, 7 years of bad luck. Here we go. Bit of timber here, which is of course a perfect little template. So what I'm going to do first is I'm actually just going to try and mess around up here in the spare bit of glass, and hopefully I don't shatter the whole pane before I attempt any serious cuts. So that's now fractured along the score with the hammer. Oh yes, baby. Okay, so that works. Time to do a much bigger cut.
I grabbed my spare MDF shelf that I'd already cut down to fit the diorama wall, which will become the backing of this mirror, and marked up the glass and put in my big first long score line, and then whipped out the hammer and started coaxing the glass to fracture along my score line. Absolute victory. But that was the shorter cut, and now we have this massive length that needs to be trimmed down.
No blood, no bad luck. I'm calling that a win.
Liquid nails down on the MDF board and then the mirror glued in place. Now the mirror is actually slightly smaller than the MDF, so I don't ram the glass into the steel shelving edges when installing it and shatter the entire thing. And after a bit of a delicate install process, I then slapped the plateau and the buildings down, and that is 100% working. The structures look like they are continuing through the mirror. I repeated the process for our second mirror, again getting some lovely cuts, and then mocked up our guild hall, sloping up into the glass beyond, and I am just blown away by how good this looks. And with some MDF cut to size and painted black and fitted into the back of the cabinet, the infinity loop effect of the mirrors is fantastic. Now we just need to complete construction of the city, and our last big missing element is of course our roads and lower foundations.
Well, the Horus Heresy is well and truly back here at Zorpazorp, and I have some mental content planned, from the Black Sands of Isfahan 5 right up to the battlements of the Imperial Palace, not to mention Calth. So if that's getting you excited, it's time to add your name to the Zorpazorp Patreon honor wall.
Today I've got 3 new statues up on the Patreon honor wall. Marky Hansen has the Beast Darktine Ogren model in a gold finish. Insomraf has a dual lightning claw wielding legionary in a hybrid of Mark II and 3 plate in an aged bronze finish, and that guy has an Ultramarine Invictus Praetorian Breacher in a gold finish. Joining the Patreon is an incredible way to support the channel. It literally just keeps everything together here at Zorpazorp, and you can score yourself your name on a banner or a plaque on the wall, or even a statue like these epic Megazorptrons dedicated in your honor.
So if you want to see even more Horus Heresy content, add your name to the Patreon honor wall. Patreon is linked down in the description, and just a massive shout out to all of my Patreons. Thank you so much. None of this would be possible without you.
So let's get on with our roads. Now these are going to be made from some free STL files I found on Thingiverse that some absolute legend sculpted on there. So I smashed all those out on the Bamboo H2D, and with the massive print bed, I had an absolute horde of pieces in very short time indeed. And now I've got a massive jigsaw puzzle to assemble to build a layout that looks nice underneath our plinths and our buildings. With it mocked up on the right half of the dio, I glued all of the tiles down with liquid nails, and then plonked it back into the case and installed our plinths and the buildings on this side. Also, I've given our newer buildings that go hard up against the glass the full weathered treatment with battle damage, and far out, this entire premise is working so damn well. I finally glued all of our plinths together, including the slightly complex Guildhall foundation, which needed a bit of dremeling and custom kit bashing to get it to fit in the case and have the shape that I wanted. And then after slapping down our plinths on our left half to plan out the roads, I actually decided right at this end stage of the project to completely change the layout and rotate the middle massive skyscraper and push it back up against the backdrop. This new layout allows the reflections in the mirrors to create much more depth, as there's kind of this negative space between the taller structures. With all our roads and plinths complete and locked in position, they needed some weathering to match the battle damage of the buildings above, so out came the Dremel, and after 10 minutes of gentle, well-targeted violence and a bunch of filling, all of our construction is complete, which means it is priming time. All of the pieces got dumped outside and then coated in a dark grey prime all over with Rust-Oleum, and then I assembled all of the buildings and started to apply a Zenithal in light grey, and the autumn afternoon gale said no, and the city was rapidly invaded by some very strange drop pods.
This build is going to go on a massive crafting journey over the next couple of weeks, but if you've been watching me bang away for the last 20 minutes, I think you deserve a sneak peek of the future. Honestly, the H2D just feels like Bamboo made the perfect machine for me. I need a bit of laser cutting and engraving and vinyl cutting, but I don't want a whole machine just for that purpose, and most of all, I have been dying for the reliability and speed of a Bamboo printer in the bigger print bed, and this guy has just knocked that out of the park. Not to mention the dual nozzle system, which is super cool. I've really loved using this guy so far. I've got heaps more work planned for him here on the channel. If you want to get one yourself, use my link down in the description. It supports me, and a massive thank you to Bamboo for coming on board and partnering with this project and continuing to support Zorpazorp.
Bamboo Lab also has the best price ever right now for their 3rd anniversary sale, so check out that link below and check out this diorama with a bit of paint. Over the next 2 months, I have 12 Horus Heresy videos smashing out in rapid succession, including the first Mark of Calth battle report that is live right now over on Zorphammer, so don't miss that over there, and smash subscribe and hit that notification bell to make sure you don't miss next week's episode on a truly massive project. A massive shout out to Paul Miller, Wilson, the War Hipster, Keta Mace, and Freak Van Helsdingen, the latest Patreons to score themselves a plaque on the Patreon honor wall. If you would like your name up on the Zorpazorp Patreon honor wall, you can get a plaque, a statue, get on a banner, then go and check out Patreon, link down below, and help keep Zorpazorp alive. And I will see you guys very soon in the next one.